Thank you, everyone. It is really such a distinct honor for me to be here, to be included in this distinguished seminar series at OCLC. I am truly blessed for this opportunity. Today, obviously, I'm going to talk about a topic that is not only important to me, but as Skip just mentioned, is clearly important to OCLC, but I think a topic that is important for us in our libraries and certainly in our communities. In the library profession, as well as in our organizations, I think we've struggled with creating and fostering the types of environments in which we embrace diversity, and where we create those environments where all of our community members can, not only can they survive, but they can thrive. We also struggle with having difficult conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I chose to start the talk with that, maybe sobering message, not because I want to bring you all down this early in the morning, but because I plan to share with you some examples of libraries that have been making strides in creating those welcoming and inclusive environments for their communities. But it is still true that most of us, and I consider myself in this group, are not necessarily equipped, nor do we have the ability to facilitate or to engage in really the difficult conversations about diversity. So I'm hoping we can have some conversation today. We speak openly about our commitment to, as we say at the University of Delaware, inclusive excellence. And our higher education culture is such that people do not overtly oppose diversity and equity issues. Instead, the offices and people dedicated to its work, we face problems that are largely invisible and difficult to understand. They're often starved of resources and are made to scramble for scarce and often dwindling resources. This climate of instability and seeming lack of dedication make it so that those who do D&I work, diversity and inclusion work, are often unsure of whether they'll even be around to see the fruits of their labor. I do want to acknowledge the challenges, and the challenges that we face. And if we can't have these difficult and honest conversations or do not demonstrate our commitment to diversity with the appropriate resources, we will never be successful in creating those welcoming environments. Again, having said that, I'll end on a more positive note. The work of diversity and inclusion does require what the former president at Princeton University calls eternal vigilance. And I hope that by the end of this discussion, and I do hope that we'll have a discussion, we'll be able to walk away with some tools for managing diversity and inclusion in our own workspaces. Before I get started, I want to share with you a little bit about my background and about my work with diversity initiatives, and then I'll also share two stories that I think are very important. They're very powerful, certainly to me. It's only within the past 10 years that I began researching and doing work in the area of diversity and inclusion. In part, being born in the Caribbean, where diversity is not a word that was used much, the topic was simply not on my radar. Much later, working in New York City, diversity took on a lot of meanings, and because in so many ways, the city and the people of the city were certainly inclusive, or that was the sense that I got. I don't mean to paint a rosy picture of New York City or my former employer, but in fact, diversity and issues surrounding diversity were not as important to me because I did not feel as though I was personally impacted by many or any of the issues that many of us typically associate with that word, and I was in an environment where it didn't seem relevant, at least not for me. I had a fairly good public school education, did my undergraduate and some graduate work at Columbia University, got my MLS at Rutgers University, and then spent a lot of time employed at Columbia University in the city of New York. My experience at each of these places helped to set the framework for the work that I would later do and continue to do now with respect to diversity education and initiatives. And I'm now able to see those experiences both at the public school that I attended, the public school that I attended for college, the private school at which I attended for undergraduate and grad and worked, through the lens of someone for whom now the word diversity has taken on a different meaning and greater importance. Shortly after accepting my position at Princeton University in 2004, then President Shirley Tillman appointed me to the university's diversity working group. The charge of this group was to explore ways in which to make that campus a more inviting and welcoming place for all people, and where staff, and this working group focused primarily on staff, as there were other groups focused on faculty and students, where staff would thrive. I won't go into the details about the ways in which Princeton University operated, and in some ways probably still does, or what earned it the reputation of being the most southern of the northern colleges. I am sure I don't have to say much about the ways in which Princeton University was, or may still be by some perceived, but suffices to say that such a working group was necessary. This was the beginning of my journey into the research of and work with diversity and inclusion. And through that new lens, I was able to look back at my previous experiences, to my time spent in the Caribbean, my time spent in New York City, my time spent in New Brunswick, New Jersey. And now I believe that some of this newfound knowledge would have been really helpful in enriching some of those experiences by giving me a different perspective through which to view them. There's so much more that I could have learned. As I also became more active professionally, I was later asked to chair the American Library Association's Committee on Diversity, and most recently asked to co-chair the ALA, the American Library Association's Task Force on Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. I co-chaired that task force with Martin Garner at the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. While chair of the Diversity Committee, we hosted or sponsored programs and workshops too numerous to mention, but that really helped to broaden and deepen my understanding of issues around diversity, particularly in the library setting. One program with which I was particularly pleased, White Privilege 101, offered by Art Moonen, a consultant in the Chicago area, was very well received. That program was so successful, we invited Art back to do a follow-up beyond white privilege, which was also very successful. So why do I share this information about my background? I'm really glad to be here this morning, not as an expert on diversity, although you can certainly fact check anything that I say. And I don't believe I'm an expert because I'm still learning. I often make reference to this book, The Experts Speak, the definitive compendium of authoritative misinformation, by Christopher Cerf, who quotes some experts in various subjects. The book title is perhaps self-explanatory with respect to who's an expert. And so I stand here not as an expert, but as someone who continues to learn about issues surrounding equity, diversity, and inclusion, and social justice. And I hope that you will, in your own ways, continue to educate yourselves and your colleagues about these issues at your respective organizations and indeed within the broader information services community. So now I said, promised you two stories. Let me share those stories. The first is about giraffes and elephants. If you've done a lot of work with diversity initiatives, you're probably familiar with the first. It's told by Roosevelt Thomas Jr., who for me and for many others is one of the fathers of diversity education. Although a relatively simple story and one that I've basically committed to memory, let me read from his book, Building a House for Diversity, published in 1999 by the American Management Association. In a small suburban community just outside the city of Artiadact, A giraffe had a new home built to his family's specifications. It was a wonderful house for giraffes, with soaring ceilings and tall doorways. High windows ensured maximum light and good views while protecting the family's privacy. Narrow hallways saved valuable space without compromising convenience. So well done was this house that it won the National Giraffe Home of the Year award. The homeowners were understandably proud. One day, the giraffe, working in his state-of-the-art workshop in the basement, happened to look out the window, and coming down the street was an elephant. I know him, thought the giraffe. We work together at the PTA committee. He's an excellent woodworker also. I think I'll ask him in to see my new shop. Maybe we can even do some work together on some projects. So the giraffe reached his head out the window and invited the elephant in. The elephant was delighted. He had liked working with the giraffe and looked forward to knowing him better. Besides, he knew about the workshop and wanted to see it. So he walked up to the basement door and waited for it to open. Come in, the giraffe said, but immediately they encountered a problem. While the elephant could get his head in the door, he could get no further. It's a good thing we made this door expandable to accommodate my workshop equipment, the giraffe said. Give me a minute while I take care of our problem. He removed some bolts and panels to allow the elephant in, and the two acquaintances were happily exchanging woodworking stories. After a while, the giraffe's wife leaned her head down the basement stairs and called to her husband. Telephone, dear, it's your boss. I'd better take that upstairs in the den, the giraffe said to the elephant. Please make yourself at home and stay a while. The elephant looked around and saw a half-finished project on the table in the far corner and decided to explore it further. As he moved through the doorway that led to that area of the shop, however, he heard an ominous scrunch. He backed out, scratching his head. Maybe I'll just join the giraffe upstairs, he thought. But as he started up the stairs, he heard them begin to crack. He jumped off and fell back against the wall. It too began to crumble. As he sat there, disheveled and dismayed, the giraffe came down the stairs. What's happening here? The giraffe asked in amazement. I was trying to make myself at home, said the elephant, and the giraffe looked around and realized, okay, I see the problem. The doorway is too narrow. We'll just have to make you smaller. There's an aerobic studio near here, and if you take some classes, we could get you down to size. Maybe, said the elephant, looking unconvinced. And the stairs are too weak to carry your weight, the giraffe continued. If you go to ballet class at night, I'm sure we could get you light on your feet. I really hope you'll do it, because I enjoy having you here. Perhaps, the elephant said, but to tell the truth, I'm not sure that a house designed for a giraffe will ever really work for an elephant. Not unless there's some major changes. I think the implications of this story may be obvious. Although you may genuinely invite others into your home may not be welcoming. And substitute your home for the library. How do we make our libraries welcoming spaces? And we'll come back to those implications shortly. Let me tell you the second story. This story is about a library, a public library, where on any given afternoon, there'll be a program in the community room that's attended by a number of senior citizens from the neighborhood. Upstairs, the young children are enjoying story time and other activities with the librarians. Throughout the building, young adults are getting help with their homework. Others are browsing the collections, especially the popular fiction collection, the audiobooks, the CDs, and DVDs. Just outside that library, yet other children and young adults will enjoy outdoor activities such as skateboarding or other games or some other library-sponsored events on the library plaza. The people that I'm describing who are using this library are from a variety of racial and ethnic backgrounds, a variety of socioeconomic classes, and, as I alluded to earlier, a variety of age ranges. What they have in common, however, is their love of and their use of this library, love for and use of this library. This library is a place where they can get literally, or almost literally, whatever they want, and usually whenever they want it, because this library is also open 7 days a week. It's an integral part of the community. And what these people don't realize, and really shouldn't have to, is that the majority of the staff who work in this library are white and mostly female. This is the story of the Princeton Public Library that is also dedicated to addressing issues of social justice, as may be evidenced in this photo. So these two stories tell us quite a bit about diversity, but from different perspectives. And before getting into these differences, perhaps I think we should define diversity. So is there anyone, and has to be here in the studio audience, who cares to share what diversity means to them? I'm an instructor and I can wait. Someone volunteer your definition of diversity. Yes?
People of a variety of backgrounds.
Sure. Okay. So thank you for that. And in perhaps high school report fashion, I'll use the Webster's definition as composed of distinct or unlike elements or qualities that are distinctly dissimilar or alike, and gives the examples of celebrities as diverse as Bob Hope and Bob Dylan. In the Task Force for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, which I co-chaired from the spring of 2014 through the summer of 2016, we wanted to be at once more explicit and more general in our definitions. And so we defined equity, diversity, and inclusion as follows. Equity, in some spaces, we use the term interchangeably with social justice when we speak about addressing those underlying conditions, the systemic issues that continue to disadvantage certain groups or privilege certain groups over another. Equity assumes a process, a system, a culture that is ultimately fair and in which all persons have equal access to opportunities. Diversity not only encompasses our differences, but also our similarities. As a task force, we struggled with this definition as some members of the task force, and not only of the task force, but of the membership in general, of the broader community, wanted to keep our definition of diversity focused on those visible characteristics such as race and ethnicity. Then while we understand the systemic oppression that members of some traditionally underrepresented groups face, we wanted our definition of diversity to be much more inclusive, and we therefore included those invisible characteristics as well, such as different abilities, sexual orientation, religion, and others. We intentionally did not list those invisible characteristics in particular because we wanted to be inclusive, and then our definition would never end. And we need our communities to move beyond the recognition or appreciation of our differences and similarities or of diversity. We must ensure that we listen to and value the unique qualities, skills, and experiences that each member of our community brings. We know that diversity of opinion leads to more successful teams. Skip made reference to that in his intro. And to be more inclusive means that we need to value those opinions. The charge of the ALA Task Force in Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion was to develop a plan with strategic actions that would result in an organization, a profession, and a community that values diversity, equity, and inclusion. For 2 years, we gathered information from ALA members and non-members alike, seeking feedback in a variety of places, including the National Conference of African American Librarians, the ALA Midwinter and Annual Meetings, the ALICE Conference, and the Reforma National Conference. We also conducted 3 surveys, and all of the information gathered contributed to the set of recommendations we made to the ALA Executive Board at the 2016 annual meeting in Orlando, Florida. We made 58 recommendations in 6 overarching categories. I'm not going to read all those recommendations. You can find them all on the ALA Connect website. But the categories with some sample recommendations include some recommendations around conference planning. We recommended ways in which the ALA conferences can be more welcoming. So from developing diversity-related conference themes to being intentional about inviting speakers who can not only address EDI, equity, diversity, and inclusion topics, but also speakers who are from traditionally underrepresented groups. For all ALA conferences, we recommend the association collaborate with local community-based organizations in the conference host city on appropriate programming. We also recommended generating lists of minority-owned businesses in the host city that ALA and its members could utilize while visiting the conference cities. With the local community, ALA would determine how conference attendees can provide benefit to that community, especially around issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion. And we recommended the association formally accept the definitions of equity, diversity, and inclusion that you saw earlier, assess EDI initiatives across the association, and seek synergies among the identified initiatives. We further recommended that each unit within the association have a diversity plan and develop strategies for implementing that plan. For membership participation, we recommended the revival of the diversity town hall meeting and that the association develop means for more active participation from all members, especially those from traditionally underrepresented groups. And finally, in recruitment, education, and retention, we recommended the assessment of ALA's EDI programs and that equity, diversity, and inclusion concepts are more integrally woven into the LIS curriculum, perhaps through the revision of the accreditation standards. The ALA board accepted the recommendations and subsequently charged a separate implementation working group, another of our recommendations, to determine how best within the association these can be carried out. That group continues to work and will provide periodic updates on their progress. Now, although the task force has a very inclusive definition of diversity within ALA and within many organizations, we still continue to think about diversity in terms of race and ethnicity. This is in part due to the fact that some racial and ethnic groups remain disproportionately represented in the profession despite the major demographic shifts in the country. The most recent ALA demographic data show that we remain largely white at 88% and female 83% profession, despite efforts aimed at advancing racial and gender equity. An earlier ALA diversity report from 2007 highlighted that between 1990 and 2000, the census between 1990 and 2000, there was an increase from 9 to 13% in the number of non-white librarians. It's troubling to think that 16 years later, we have not made any progress in changing that statistic again, despite our efforts. We can speculate on the causes of this stagnation, and I'd welcome your thoughts during the Q&A period. So this ALA report, the ALA report, Diversity Counts, looked at representational diversity, looking at the population at large and the population of librarians. It also looked only at race and ethnicity, gender, and age. The report suggests that ALA and other library organizations have a lot to do in terms of recruiting and retaining a diverse workforce. In doing so, however, we must look at the different needs of the population served by various libraries, perhaps by region or by state or locality, to see if such representational diversity makes sense. It's important for all of us to understand that diversity does not equal quota. It doesn't mean we need to have a certain percentage of African American, Latinx, Asian, Pacific Islander librarians who are male, disabled, and between the ages of 23 and 28. I'm merely suggesting that we understand that as the demographics of the United States continues to change, libraries will also have to change the ways in which we provide services to meet the needs of our of our changing populations. And one of the ways we can do so is by changing the face of our libraries. As a profession, we have many programs designed to increase representative diversity. At the national level, some of these programs include the Spectrum Scholarship, and I'm grateful to OCLC for providing that donation to the Spectrum Scholarship. The Spectrum program since 1997 through the American Library Association has awarded scholarships to more than 1,000 individuals from traditionally underrepresented groups to complete their requirements in an ALA-accredited LIS program. Spectrum not only provides scholarship assistance, it also provides leadership development opportunities and creates a cohort experience among the recipients of the scholarship each year. The Association of Research Libraries also hosts several programs aimed at increasing representational diversity. These programs are geared towards individuals at various stages in their careers, early career, mid-career, more senior, and like Spectrum, includes a leadership development component. ARL has also partnered with other organizations such as the Music Library Association and the Society of American Archivists to help bring greater diversity in those areas of specialization within the profession. More recently, a group of academic libraries partnered with the Association of College and Research Libraries to extend the reach of the Diversity Alliance. In the Diversity Alliance, participating libraries agreed to host a library resident, and while the format of the residency program may vary by institution, by being a part of the Alliance, the residents will become a part of that cohort and will have common professional development opportunities. Residents will get to learn not only about the host institution, but about the institutions that are partners in the Alliance. So these are some examples of national programs that are designed to increase representational diversity, and we can debate about the success of these programs based on the demographic information that I presented earlier. Individual libraries have also developed programs that serve the same purpose, and I'll share perhaps some selfish examples of some libraries. The libraries at Washington University in St. Louis, where I spent 3 years before moving to the University of Delaware, partnered with the library at Lincoln University in Missouri and HBCU that offers library science as an undergraduate minor to help identify students, undergraduate students, to participate in the WashU Summer Internship Program. Initially funded by a grant, this program was later written into the library's general operating budget. The interns spent 8 weeks over the summer at the libraries at WashU, worked on a project, attended the ALA annual conference, and got general exposure to the operations of a research library. The students who participated in the first 2 years of the program have now all either completed their MLS or one is still in an MLS program. And pictured along with Rudolph Clay, head of diversity initiatives at the WashU Libraries, are the two 2015 summer interns, one of whom is now in library school. The other is still finishing his undergraduate program at Lincoln University. Increasing representational diversity takes commitment from the library leadership as well as commitment from the library. When the former university librarian, also at Washington University in St. Louis, wanted to have a diverse leadership team, he actively recruited those who he believed would not only add that diversity to the leadership team, but those who would add value to the organization. Through his active recruitment efforts, the leadership team at Washington University in December 2014 looked like this. may not be easy to tell, but both the visible and invisible diversity characteristics are represented by this group in terms of race and ethnicity, gender, age, sexual orientation, and religion. At the time of this photo, we were the most diverse senior leadership team in any ARL library. Of course, half of us are gone. By emphasizing, especially at this level, the importance of diversity in recruitment and hiring, we sent the message not only to that library, but also to the entire campus and the community of our commitment. And through this demonstration, we were able to successfully influence hiring across the library as well. So when we say in the profession that there isn't a pipeline, I have to ask, where are those over 1,000 Spectrum scholars? Where are the ARL Diversity Fellows? Where are the other graduates of LIS programs who are from traditionally underrepresented groups and who have invested their time in an LIS program and in the profession? I'm not proposing an answer to this question, but challenging each of us to ask those questions when we recruit. And we can also ask, how can we develop our own pipeline, ensuring that there are qualified candidates with a wide range of backgrounds for any vacant position that we have? As important as representative diversity is, it is not enough. How do you say, welcome to the library? Are we like the giraffe who builds a house only for giraffes? Lee Bollinger, president at Columbia University, argues that for universities to remain competitive, they must determine and deliver what future graduates will need to know about their world. As we, our colleges and universities, our communities, and our libraries become more global in our focus, we have to provide the necessary exposure to, knowledge and understanding of, and education about different cultures and different peoples. Having this knowledge, having this exposure, and the set of skills that go with them make us more competitive in the job market, in the educational market, and makes us better informed and just plain better citizens. Dr. Roberto Ibarra at the University of New Mexico speaks of contextual diversity, in which he says the institution would apply solutions appropriate to their needs. So think about the Princeton Public Library, for example. Dr. Ibarra's concept of contextual diversity, where the library adapts to meet the needs of its user population, requires an understanding of the user's needs. The library, the Princeton Public Library, is a great example of this contextual diversity in action. This library and the staff members there understand the needs of their users and do what they need to in order to meet those needs. It's therefore just as welcoming a place for the young Latina child as it is who's brought there for story time by her parent as it is for the African American young adult doing homework, as it is for the white elderly woman there for a program event, or any of the other groups to which I made reference earlier. In some sense, it doesn't matter that the staff is not representative of the community, although that would be important. What matters is that they gather the information about the needs of their users and provide the services and programs that meets those needs. Dr. Sylvia Hurtado, in a 1999 article, pointed out that an institution's ability to provide a comfortable environment for learning and socializing is the key factor in facilitating the intellectual and social development of all students. Although she was speaking about institutions of higher education, the same could be said of our libraries, because we also serve an educational function. A part of that comfortable environment is the presence of a diverse workforce. Dr. Hurtado refers, diversity in this context is not limited to racial and ethnic, age, or gender diversity, but rather to diversity of thought and opinion. There are certainly compelling reasons for diversity in the corporate sector and in the educational setting, but why should the library be any different? And why should we care about diversity? We all know that people seek information in different ways. For those of us who went to library school, we probably spent a lot of time talking about the information-seeking behaviors of, name that group. And in addition to seeking information in different ways, how do we let our community members know that they are welcome? How do we demonstrate this welcoming environment? Certainly, the welcome sign in multiple languages is a start, but are services and the ways in which we provide assistance also welcoming? So let's have a look at the catalog help information screen from several libraries, the University of Chicago and the Columbia University Libraries. Many libraries no longer provide search help screens because everyone's using the simple search methods now, many people are. But for those that still provide search help, such as this page at the University of Chicago, in the examples that they list, and I was particularly taken by this example, the performer of Coltrane. Right? In most examples, when one's searching for a musician or a composer, the examples given are Mozart or Beethoven. Great examples. But as a library providing examples, and you can demonstrate your commitment to diversity through the examples that you use. Similarly, at Columbia University, the first search term they provide is that for the African National Congress. Also at Columbia, they provide tips on searching the catalog in multiple languages, again, understanding who their user population is and how they can meet the needs of those users. Sorry. There are other libraries that that demonstrate their inclusiveness in various ways. And let me walk you through some of those. The libraries at the University of Madison, Wisconsin, created a reflection space, in part in response to the students of the Muslim faith who wanted a space to pray. They called this a reflection space, and it's open to everyone, but the idea was generated by the Muslim student population. Again, at Washington University in St. Louis, the Center for Diversity, the university campus's Center for Diversity and Inclusion is located on the second floor of the library. So while it doesn't report to the library, it creates a great synergy for collaboration and cooperation between the Center for Diversity and Inclusion and the library. The University of Maryland explicitly highlights a diversity statement in their collection development policy. And at the Yale University Library, they showcase, at the Beinecke Library, they showcase the diversity in the Beinecke's collection, and you can see the 3 exhibitions that will be on display in the spring of 2017. Integration, Titanic, and Treasures from Japan. The Association of Research Libraries has been collecting information from its member libraries, highlighting the efforts that they have been engaging in with respect to diversity and inclusion, and you can certainly have a look at what each of these libraries has been contributing to their campus organizations, and the University of Delaware's will be there soon. I was appalled that it wasn't there. So, but in what other ways yet? In what other ways have libraries been demonstrating this commitment? They've created research guides, hosted events and programs of various types, developed exhibitions, been a hub for open educational resources, offsetting the cost of education for students from low-income families, collaborated with others on their campuses and in their communities, conducted climate assessments, developing buddy systems, implementing photo staff directories so the staff in the libraries can get to know or at least recognize each other. putting a diversity requirement in their position announcements, and more. I applaud ARL's effort in trying to collect information about these activities, and the Task Force for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion also recommended something similar for ALA. And for those libraries that haven't done extensive work in the area of EDI, these examples can serve as models and will help them will help them to find a program, event, or initiative that may work in their setting. I believe this resource guide from ALA will be available soon. So most of our discussions about diversity, and indeed the focus of the ALA Diversity Counts report, is about the numbers, looking at the census data and making the case that the demographics of the library profession as a whole should be reflective of the demographics of the larger society. One could argue, and I perhaps just made the case, that while it is not necessary to have a staff that is reflective of the community in order to be successful, there is still merit to this idea. Diversity in its many forms can bring different and new ideas to the fore, can redress past wrongs, can help to establish a national society where we learn to overcome our biases, etc., and where we can bring people together. It's easy to get and present data on race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, gender, and age. Less easy to get information about the other dimensions of diversity, such as religion, sexual orientation, and to some extent, disability status. This is by no means an indication that we should ignore these dimensions. Think of the elephant in the giraffe's house. The giraffe thought he was being a gracious host when he invited the elephant in to visit and to share in a discussion of mutual interest, a topic of mutual interest. But the giraffe still didn't realize that the house he built was only for him and for other giraffes. So despite the commonalities they have, their activity in the PTA, living in the same neighborhood, their love of woodworking, they don't see eye to eye on some basic concepts. Some might argue that the giraffe needs to change in the same way that the giraffe was suggesting the elephant change, by taking ballet lessons and aerobic classes so he could fit into the house. But embracing diversity requires that all of us do some work. The successful diversity initiatives can only be achieved through teamwork. I began by speaking about my work on the Task Force Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, and this group was comprised of 13 members from across the library profession. It was created because achieving diversity and managing it effectively are important goals for the American Library Association, as it is for many of us in our own organizations. The ALA president wanted this group to think of ways to institutionalize the positive ways we think about diversity initiatives so that current and future generations of librarians and library workers will benefit, and where those from diverse backgrounds will not have to rely on a single champion or a single office to do that work. So as you think about the programs that you're planning or you currently have in your libraries, I'll end the presentation by asking you to think about the kind of house that you want to build. I am, again, delighted to have been here, invited to spend some time with you this morning, and appreciate your taking the time. I do believe we may have some time for questions. I did say I wanted this to be a discussion, and so I'm happy to entertain any questions that you have now. Thank you.